Hey everyone, today we're starting critical question 2, which is how does sport medicine address the demands of specific athletes? So we've just finished critical question 1 and now we're going to be moving on to this one. Now, as a part of sports medicine, what we actually do learn is how can we use sports medicine to address demands of specific athletes. Now, I can split up these specific athletes in a few groups. So first off, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of critical question 2. So in this critical question, we'll be looking at groups such as children and young athletes, which we're doing today, adults and aged athletes, as well as female athletes. So I've created a semi-acronym here. If you can just hang on with me, I'll just fill in all the values. So this one will be female athletes. This one will be adults and aged. And then this one is just nothing, and with the C it's just children, and this one's just young and athletes. So what I've done here is I've created a little acronym. The only thing is that the N doesn't count, but it's nice to remember. Fancy. So I just created this for this video just now, so I haven't actually used this before, but I just thought it'd be a good idea. If you have any other suggestions, feel free to comment. But this is just for the entire critical question 2. These are the things we're going to be focusing on, and now in this lesson, I'll be looking at children and young athletes. So first off, I'll be talking about medical conditions. So let me just move down to medical conditions. We have 3 medical conditions that we really focus on, and those are asthma, diabetes, and epilepsy. Now the main reason why we focus on these 3 medical conditions is that it's more prevalent in children, and children are more likely to have all 3 of these. Well, maybe not so much of diabetes and asthma, because that can also occur later on in life, but children do have these, and there are specific ways we can deal with these illnesses when children have them, and they want to participate in sports. So what you really need to know is what asthma is and, just some little characteristics about it. So first off, we can just say that asthma is a condition that constricts the airways in the lungs, making it difficult for the athlete to breathe. Now, if you can just think about it, asthma is pretty common, and a lot of people die from asthma every year. Asthma is quite severe, and if you just kind of visualize what it's trying to tell you here, imagine not being able to breathe efficiently. Imagine every single breath is short and you need more breaths to breathe in. Now, sometimes asthma attacks can be really dangerous, and for children especially, there has to be something we need to do. There has to be something we have to do in order to, account for these attacks and asthma itself when people are playing sports and are children or young athletes. So, some symptoms of asthma include wheezing, coughing, shortness of breath, or lightheadedness. Now, for medical conditions, for this asthma, we need to know how we can actually help reduce the risks of children who have asthma while they're playing sports. So I've included here, this is like an excerpt of my information where how we can manage these risks. So I've written, asthma can be managed and minimized through warming up gradually, as well as ensuring a complete cool down till breathing has returned to normal. Maintaining a steady intensity, such as, as sudden changes to breathing can trigger an attack, as well as following all medical advice, such as the use of preventer. I'm sure you've all seen it, like those Revealer puffers, where they breathe it in and they breathe it out, as well as through eating, as well as through adequate hydration and collecting medical information. So you need to know previous attacks and severity. So before someone starts playing, before a child or young athlete starts participating in a sport, it is important that you know their previous history, their previous attacks and severity, and that's pretty much all I can tell you about in managing asthma, because this is just an excerpt of my assignment, and I thought that my assignment was structured pretty well, so I thought I might as well give you the information that I had there, as it does answer this entire syllabus point. Now, but I forgot to mention, this entire syllabus point, after it actually focuses these areas, another really important area is we need to think about the implications of each of these and considerations of how we can allow young people to engage in sport and how each is managed. So we need to know how we can manage these situations that we have. Okay, so I've just talked about asthma. And now I'm going to move on to diabetes. So diabetes is a condition in which glucose cannot be absorbed effectively by the body. Now there are two types of diabetes, and I'll try to explain it here. You don't really need to know this because in PE, as long as you know the general definitions, it should be fine. So if you can't remember the technical terms, it's okay, but please do try because it's always better if you do know them. So high blood glucose levels, which is called hyper. I always try to remember hyper being, if a child is hyperactive, they're moving around and they're doing all these things. So when there's high blood glucose levels, it's hyperglycemia, and it's characterized by thirst, vomiting, excessive urination, rapid breathing, and a weak pulse. Whereas low blood glucose levels, called hypoglycemia. So how I like to think of this is, hypothermia. When it's hypothermia, someone's really, really cold. So in the same sense, it has low something which is low, just like low temperature, low blood glucose levels, which is hypoglycemia, and that is characterized by rapid pulse, sweating, shaking, dizziness, and confusion. So now I've just described and defined what diabetes is. So you need to know how we can actually take care of the any young athlete or children who have diabetes when they are playing sports. So I've written here that I'll just kind of highlight this for you guys. Similarly, diabetes can be managed and minimized through eating correct foods before competition. So what I mean by that is, if you can just imagine, if someone had diabetes, they might need to have more sugar, they might need to have less sugar. So it's very important that before they start competing in any type of competition, they've had the adequate type of food that they're supposed to be having, and they don't actually have anything which is over the top or too little. Next, having sugary foods available, such as lollies and juice, ready for emergencies. This is specifically targeting people with low blood glucose levels, which is hypoglycemia. If you can once again just think about it, if you don't have enough glucose in your blood and something happens and you start having rapid pulse, sweating, shaking, dizziness, and confusion, a good idea would actually be having sugary food in order to increase that blood glucose level and get it back to normal. And for anyone with hypoglycemia, they usually do carry lollies and juice ready. So if you do see anyone who has to have sugar or needs to have something which is sugary, you might want to ask them if they have hypoglycemia, because chances are they probably do. And that's just how you can, that's just another way how you can just make sure that if anything does happen, a preventative measure would be having these things available. And lastly, another important thing is having adequate hydration. So there are a few things that I can definitely point out to you guys, and that is in pretty much every strategy that we'll learn today in regarding medical conditions. Hydration always plays quite a big role, and even in the thermoregulation part that we'll do later, it also plays a massive role, because hydration is important for a lot of things, and you must always kind of remember that you can always fall back on hydration for any of these medical conditions, as well as thermoregulation when you need to list strategies. So, and lastly, it does say that you need to have some sort of insulin available, and that's targeting people who have hyperglycemia, which is a high blood glucose level. And all that means is that if you do have that high blood glucose level, any emergency that happens, if it does get characterized by thirst, vomiting, excessive urination, we do have insulin available to help decrease that blood glucose level. So that's pretty much it for diabetes. And epilepsy is quite simple, and all it is a disruption of brain function, and it causes seizures or fits, which may be dangerous for young athletes and children. So I'm just going to reference this to a real life example again. If you've ever played video games such as Pokemon or anything like that on the Game Boy Advance, suppose, they always have in the beginning like seizures might occur, please be careful of seizures, blah blah. They have the warning just to make sure that a seizure doesn't occur. Now, seizures are widely linked with epilepsy. When epilepsy does happen, it's just characterized as disruption of brain function. There is no real, very, very specific definition for this, because anything can happen. And seizures are most likely going to happen in epilepsy. So that is why they tell you, because epileptic people are prone to seizures, and seizures can happen in young athletes and children, and in that case there are specific things that we need to do to make sure that they can come out of it safely. So first thing, if epilepsy does occur, do not restrain the person whilst the seizure is happening, and move obstacles away. So we don't want to restrain the person. Do not restrain, and move obstacles away. And also, after this, allow for long periods of rest afterwards. Now, I do want to make you remember this this, so I'm just going to tell you a little something. When a seizure does occur, it uses quite a lot of energy, and when that energy is used up, that person is going to be very tired when they do wake up. A seizure can last, it can last quite a long time, and because of that, after they wake up, they can just be completely gone. Sometimes seizures are really short, but the amount of energy used in those short seizures can be so much. In epilepsy, especially, it can cause to a severe fatigue and tiredness, meaning that you do need to let them rest. Sometimes they can sleep hours on end. And lastly, for epilepsy, a recommended thing is also seek medical attention if required. This isn't always the case, but if it is the first time that someone's had an epileptic fit, you should really seek medical attention, because it might just be very, very dangerous to leave it alone. So the next part of the syllabus actually asks us, this critical question actually asks us to look at overuse injuries, which are stress fractures. Now, we've looked at overuse injuries already in our first critical question when we were classifying injuries, but in this we'll look at it in a bit more detail and a bit more specific application, so to adults, to children and young athletes specifically. So let's just have a look at overuse injuries now. So what I've said for overuse injuries is basically also just an excerpt from my assessment task, but I've made sure that it's succinct. I have cut out quite a lot of words just so you can understand it as quick as you can. PE is very content heavy, and because of that I do need to take information from everywhere in bits and pieces, just to make sure that you guys get the best information possible. So overuse injuries such as shin splints and tendonitis are injuries caused by excessive repeated stress to an area in the body. So you guys already probably know this because we've done it in critical question 1. That's just a basic definition. Now I go into why it's important for children and young athletes and how we have to maintain it. So for children and young athletes, the actual problem is that overuse injuries, they are much more prone to it, because if you imagine, once again, I'm using that term too many times, but if you imagine a children or a young athlete, their bones are still developing, and they just don't have the same type of strength that an adult has. They have unformed muscles, unformed bones, and it just means that they're not fully developed. Additionally, with that, they can also, a lot of them do have poor biomechanical technique, meaning that they don't actually do all their movements and everything in the correct method and the correct technique, meaning that even the shortest or the smallest mistake can lead to a common, a very big injury, just in the sense of overuse injuries themselves. Additionally, overuse injuries are caused by long periods of physical activity without rest, and it's really important that it's really important. This is why it's important that we take breaks, we make sure they're hydrated, make sure that they have a lot of, there's a lot of things you need to follow to make sure that children don't actually get any overuse injuries from participating in the sport. So what I want to talk about now is also, additionally, in overuse injuries, a big mistake is giving them equipment which is too big or is just not suited to children. So this is a good point that you can put in your essays, because I found it extremely easy just to think about it. If a child is playing tennis, and if he has a tennis racket which is too big for his hands, right? Chances are that he's going to get an overuse injury, because all that force that's going onto his hand can't really handle such a heavy weight and such a big object just to move around all day. For a child or for a young adult, it should be shrink down to their size in ratio. And in my example here, I've said large size football boots and oversized shoes, and that's just trying to justify it. Another example for the same type of thing I just told you about. So then, sure, what can we do to prevent this? What strategies can we use from sports medicine to actually prevent this? So in order to combat these overuse injuries in children, we need to make sure that the intensity of the exercise is reduced, and more breaks with frequent hydration should occur. By actually doing that, we're reducing the chances of overuse injury by a lot. Because overuse injuries, the main reason why they occur is because of repetitive movements and over short periods of time, so which actually do cause stress in a specific area of the body. So therefore, by having these frequent hydration breaks, or just having frequent breaks and frequent hydration, we can make sure that these children don't actually work too hard or play too long with the same type of movements and make sure that overuse injuries do not occur. So I've just added on here additionally that they should consistently be supervised, and they should always we should always use a RICE regime whenever an overuse injury occurs to try and help treat it, because it is once again a soft tissue injury. One more thing I've added is first aid qualified supervisors or coaches should be present. Well, if you do get a question which is about strategies, I'd recommend just putting as many points as you can down. Okay, so now let's move up to thermoregulation. Okay, so basically thermoregulation is the ability to keep the body temperature in certain boundaries regardless of external environments. So for humans, it's normally something like 37 to 38 degrees, and just 37 degrees Celsius to 38 degrees Celsius. And anything outside of that range, we start sweating or we start shivering, and thermoregulation is basically keeping our body into that range so we can pretty much function optimally. If anyone does do bio, this is a little bit related to metabolism, but not that much. But it's just basically the maintenance, just the ability to keep the body temperature in certain boundaries. Okay, so how is this specific to children and young athletes, and what do I actually even mean about thermoregulation in sports? So in sports, if we do play any type of sport, we do realize that we do either sweat or we do whatever we need to do to keep our body at a needed temperature for functioning. So when children and young athletes, since they are not that developed, and since they cannot actually efficiently control their body temperature at 37.5, which is, mainly because children aren't actually able to sweat as much as us, number one, which means that's mainly because they don't have fully developed sweat glands. And number two, it's also because they have slower rates of acclimatization. So they can't actually just train inside an area. Oh, wait, let me just try and define acclimatization first for you guys. So acclimatization is when you can train in a specific area to the environment that you're going to be actually playing in. So I could train in a very, very hot area because I know that my actual competition or sport is in a very hot condition. Therefore, our body will get used to that temperature. Well, children cannot actually do that. Children cannot actually do that effectively, at least. They have slower rates of acclimatization, so they can't get used to the climate that quickly as adults can. So there's two underlying reasons why thermoregulation is, difficult inside children and young athletes, and why it's not that effective. Number one is because they actually do not have fully developed sweat glands, so they have underdeveloped sweat glands. And number two, they have slower rates of acclimatization. Okay, perfect. So we're going to move on now to what strategies can we do to counteract all of this. So there are some very simple strategies that we can do, and number one could be just accommodate for the children. So in extreme weather conditions, we should avoid them completely, or we can have regular breaks and frequent hydration should occur, as well as something like wearing light and loose clothing, just to make sure that not that much heat is taken in, whereas it can be reflected out. Additionally, parental supervision should be present. So now, if you have been watching this video the whole way throughout, you should realize a few things. There's a big trend in that I've always used hydration. I've always talked about having breaks, at least sometime or another, and having parental supervision is also very common as well in all three of our strategies. Well, in every single strategy we have had so far in regarding medical conditions, thermoregulation. So for this, these are the trends, and if you do pick up on these, you can just consistently use these same strategies in every single thing in medical conditions as well as thermoregulation while they can still be valid. So the next thing I'd like to talk about, which is the last part of critical question 1, part 1 today, is the appropriateness of resistance training. So resistance training, it can benefit young athletes and children, but it's really not that great if it's in heavy weights, or if it's in too many repetitions, or if it's just too much. Even though it can benefit them, there need to be certain precautions which have to be followed in order to ensure that their health and well-being is maintained at a good pace. Because first off, it is very important that no heavy weights before 16. That is one of the key rules, and the main reason is because if children and young athletes do heavy weights, they can damage growth plates, and it is very bad for the body. Their body really can't handle such heavy weights, and it will not be able to cope accordingly. So up to 12, very light training with the body only, and after 12 you can start using weights, but it should not be heavy. It should not be anything that heavy, and the main aim when you want to do any type of resistance training being, lifting heavy weights or just anything which requires resistance inside the body, inside the muscles, I mean, means that you cannot do anything really heavy till you're 15, 16 at least. And when you are 15 or 16, when you do start doing heavier weights, it is important to actually focus on form. Form is really important. Having good form is much better than lifting heavier weights, and therefore it is more important that we focus on form and skills, as well as even after 15, I would still kind of say light weights is fine as long as you have good form in something like 15 to 20 reps. Reps meaning repetitions. So until 15, just not have any heavy weights. That's the appropriateness of resistance training. Children don't actually require any really heavy weights anytime before then. So I hope you did learn something from this video. This is part 1 of this critical question 2, and I will be talking about the next part of this critical question 2 in the next part. Thank you.